as we age, we got to step out of this conditioning that like we just are fading away and withering into nothing. And, if we're feeling any of that, like getting some support, maybe we need hormonal support, maybe we need coaching. Like if you're not feeling excited and enlivened and like wanting to share your wisdom, and I don't mean you have to become a coach or have a huge platform, but just like being in that archetype, then maybe some support is necessary to help you really like embrace. And so maybe you need some support, some coaching, some like support on the physical level to help you like really come into this, I think, reclamation. Because so much in our 20s, 30s, and 40s is figuring out how the heck to like be a human and then taking care of others and building.
Hello, darlings, and welcome to Not Over, Just Different. I'm Natalie Ledwell, and I'm here to share deeply insightful and vulnerable conversations with you from people who are willing to open up and share what their journey's been like so that you can learn and be inspired to take action in yours. It's never too late to begin again or to see a new perspective. No matter what your dreams or goals are, you'll find inspiration and community here. It's time to rediscover yourself, reignite your passions, and make the next 50 years even more full than the first. Have you found yourself at a time in your life where you're thinking, who am I? Maybe you've had a very rich and big life. You've been a mum, you've been a career person, but you've got to this point in your life and you're like, okay, these things are over now, but who am I without these things that you've made part of your identity? Well, I'm joined this week by my good friend, Christine Hassler. She's a best-selling author, a spiritual psychologist, and a coach, and she's also the host of the podcast, Over It and On With It. And today we talk about what it's like to navigate through that inquiry and to figure out who you want to be rather than what you need to do to really enjoy this second chapter of your life. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, I have my awesome and amazing friend, Christine Hassler with me. Hi, Christine. How are you, darling?
I'm good. It's so good to see you again.
It's been a little while, so I'm really glad that we get this opportunity to catch up on air, which is awesome. So Christine is here because we were talking just a little bit before we started recording. And I want to relate it back to a situation that I had a while ago when my husband and I separated. And I was in this place of, oh my God, I don't know who I am. And I know there's a lot of women who would be listening to this podcast, and it may not be necessarily the end of a marriage, although it could be, your kids growing up and leaving home. It could be stepping out of a career. But we get to this stage where what we do and the people that we have in our life become such a big part of our identity that if those things are taken away, we're just like, I have no idea who I am without this, because it seems to be a big part of who we are. Now, I know that after a week or so of asking that question, I was able to shift the question to start again and do something fresh. So that's the subject we're going to be talking about today. So, Christine, let's talk a little bit about how this question relates to you and your experience right now. Because you've gone through quite a few shifts. You've changed where you live and you're a mom and, married and the...
Yeah, I kind of did the opposite. I had my career first and then got married and had my child in my 40s, right? So I'm approaching 50 and I have a 2.5-year-old. So I'm kind of like the opposite of where a lot of people are. And I want to acknowledge you that it only took you a week to shift that question from who am I to who do I want to be? And that's a testament to this kind of work and coaching and personal development and mindset, because a lot of us really get stuck in the grief of what ended. Another thing I'm seeing, especially with women in their midlife, is they're taking care of an aging parent and then that parent passes, right? So it's like so much of, I feel, what we, particularly as women, how we identify is relationally and who we're caring for. And that's beautiful. That's something, that's innate, I think, within the feminine and within being a woman. But sometimes we can get a little lost in that and forget about who we are. So we can bookmark that and I'll come back to answer your question. So I've had many identity shifts, which is interesting for me because one of the biggest things that I've had to work with in my life is fearing change and uncertainty. Life's been like, oh, this is a lesson you need to learn. Right, we're going to throw a lot of uncertainty and transition and things aren't going to go as you planned. And so I was following the script in my 20s. So I did the whole go to college, get a job, get engaged by like mid 20s, and get married. And then in my early 30s, I had done all those things, and I didn't feel that sense of satisfaction, fulfillment that I thought I would. I'd already had a big career change in my 20s. So I thought, okay, it's just the career. I need to change the career. So I left my job in Hollywood and started this career that I have now 20 years ago. And that helped a little bit. But then it was like, well, okay, but I have my career, but I don't have my relationship. So maybe if I have my relationship, then I'll be happy. And so then I got the marriage, and then that wasn't really it either. And so what I realized in all these identity shifts is I was looking for an identity that would make me feel a certain way versus actually being in the uncertainty, letting go of all the things I thought I needed to be or should be, both from my own belief systems, both the kind of like unconscious collective beliefs about what a woman should be that I bought into. It was letting all that fall away that I really was like, okay, let me discover who I am. And it took me a while, I'd say nearly a decade, to really settle into this is what feels good to me. And I really do think that comes with age. Now, it really pisses me off that women aging is seen as we decrease in value for some reason. We're not as desirable or not as valuable. It's harder for a woman, at 50 to get a job than a woman at 25, when a woman at 50 has far more experience and wisdom. Of course, I'm making some generalization statements, but I think we can all agree that we have a kind of warped view of women aging. And as a woman, it's kind of hard not to fall into that at some point. And for me, where I really hit it as I was hitting my late 30s, I was unmarried. I had no children. And everybody at that time, like, the thing you do in your 30s is you get married and you have kids. That was something I bought into. But then I had to really step back and go, okay, is that the identity that I'm being told I should have? Or is that what's really true for me right now? And what I discovered is I had all this expansion in my career, all this like excitement and activity that was happening that honestly, Natalie, maybe I could have done it partnered, but I definitely couldn't have done it as a mom. I would have had to sacrifice something, either time with my kid or that. And so it was a risk for me because it's like, wow, if I choose to really go for this, to really slip into this identity as an entrepreneur, and as a thought leader and as an expert, what does this mean about all this other stuff I thought I was supposed to be? And I had to get out of my head about it and just go into what was actually showing up and what was feeling aligned. And then I got to my end of my 30s and it was time. I felt like, okay, now I'm time to partner. And met my husband, another Australian, got married very fast. And then the whole question of, okay, I've had my career, I have my husband, not that I was checking things off a list, but just kind of looking like, wow, like, do I want a child? And I really had to ask myself that question and really ponder it. And this is, I think, an important thing for any woman going through an identity shift, is making sure we're not doing something we think we should do or we think would make us happy, or we're doing because everybody else is doing, or we're not doing it because we think people are going to not like it, and really go into how it feels inside of us. And I'll just use the example of having a child, but you could apply this to, moving away from your kids, or going through a divorce, or leaving a career, or starting a career, or maybe you're transitioning your parent from you taking care of them to them being in a care center. Like, any of these decisions, what I find is so helpful is to get out of the shoulds, to get out of the either or, to get out of that, like, I have to do this because this is who I've always been, and really into what feels true for me and like, what are my fears about it? Like, getting really honest with ourselves. Like, do I want this or do I not want this? So we don't make a fear-based choice. And I was actually kind of leaning towards not having a child. And when I actually went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza, my second advanced retreat, and really fell into, okay, am I making a fear-based choice? And the answer was yes. My fear was, well, will I get pregnant? But my biggest fear was, I have a pattern of worrying, especially about things and people I love. And my fear was having something I love so much and having anxiety about it for the rest of my life. And this is the kind of honesty, not fear-based thinking, but the kind of honesty I think that we need to have with ourselves when going through any big transition. It's like, wow, okay, that's really a fear that's there. So I can acknowledge it. We can acknowledge that the fear may be present, but do we want that to drive our action? So it's like, okay, that fear is present, but like, what's my desire? Because we can't really get in touch with our desires about what we truly desire to be and create in the world until we can kind of comb through the fear. And my desire when I dropped into love was like, wow, I actually do feel a child around me. And I do feel like I want to experience motherhood. And so I want to give it a shot. And then I really surrendered it. That was the next piece. I really didn't have attachment to it. And I was blessed that it happened quite easily for me naturally. And then there came the whole identity shift of having a kid. It's like, whoa, by doing whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, by having control and certainty over my life and being in my 40s and going, whoa, like this is a huge identity shift of how I live my life. And I think what can be difficult, and I'll wrap up after this, with these big changes is that something that's supposed to be a blessing, if we feel challenge in it, we feel guilty. Or if something's supposed to be a challenge, but we feel like it's a blessing, like you've raised your kids and they're going off to college and people are like, oh, don't you feel so heartbroken? And you're like, actually, no, I actually feel amazing at my house myself. You know, we can get into these conundrums of like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And I had to be really honest with that identity shift that I was grieving of my life while I also had this beautiful thing happen. So identity shifts and transitions, they can be, I want to say messy, but maybe it's more, a better word is colorful. They can be all the feels. And when we think they only should be a certain way, we're really limiting our experience of the growth that can happen during those shifts.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about making that decision because, you know, what you're reminding me of is when I was in my 30s and I always knew I didn't want children. But I remember Glenn's mother was just devastated, you know, so we'd always just say, well, just not yet for her. Although I was pretty clear in my mind, it was a no. But I remember reading an article when I was around 35 saying, look, if you're going to do it, this is the time to think about it. And I said to Glenn, we should talk about this because I know we've always said no, but this is the time that we really need to figure out if it is a true no. And I remember sitting there and my thought process was, because, you know, back then, I think we just got out of a nightclub. And so we were sort of still in the party lifestyle. And I'm like, I can't imagine being in my 50s and still partying. I'm like, if I don't have a child, then what does life look like? I remember making a decision that maybe we should try because I couldn't visualize. I was going into the unknown and I couldn't visualize what that was going to look like. And so I'm like, well, maybe we should. And Glenn was like, I don't want to, but if you want to, then okay, maybe we should. And then it was so great because we told our families that we would start trying in the following year. And they all started to act like I was already pregnant. And I'm like, oh, yeah, no, this is a hard no. This is a hard no. I'm like, definitely not. But I think that when we're making decisions like this, just because you can't imagine what it's going to be like, I think you have to trust what that feeling is because my feeling was no. But my mind was going, well, what else are you going to do with your life?
Right.
And who knew it was going to turn out like this? We would not be having this conversation right now if I had have chosen to have a child because I would have been a mother and I would have stayed in Sydney and I would have had a different kind of a life. So, you know, I think that when you are in those points of where you're trying to make that decision, you really want to sit with what you're feeling, even though you may not see what that future.
Exactly. And I think that is where we disconnect from our superpower of intuition and discernment, which are both feminine superpowers, is we get into the uncertainty of what it could look like. You know, like I was telling you before we started recording, we're considering making a move right now that makes zero logical sense. Zero. And in fact, like our dream house here in Austin popped up, ticks all our boxes, was down the street from my parents and my sister, like could not have been more perfect. And we couldn't do it. And because we've practiced embodiment and does this feel in my body like a yes or a no? And oftentimes what we feel in our body is not the same of what our mind is telling us because our minds, especially in this modern world where minds run the show, our mind is super convincing. It's super convincing. And there's a younger part of us, an inner child part of us that really needs safety and certainty. So why children do well with routine. And what we have to remember is that's just a part, right? And there's this wise adult and this really intuitive soul that can feel into things and that can handle the uncertainty. You know, why uncertainty from my point of view is so scary for us is that most trauma, and trauma exists on a spectrum, right? So it's everything from somebody saying something mean to you at school to being abused in your own home. Not that those are the ends, but I'm just giving examples of range. And most of any of that on the spectrum happens when we're in uncertainty. We didn't see it coming. And it creates a lot of uncertainty. So uncertainty for us on like a primal level, on a subconscious inner child level, on a nervous system level is really scary. And we can get so consumed by that fear that we actually don't take action that's in alignment with what we truly desire, or we don't even really actually know what our desires are.
I think the thing that really helps me when I'm looking at things that are all leaning into uncertainty, and it can be difficult, but it is everything's happening for my highest good. Like these things are happening for me. Even something like a worldwide pandemic. I remember when we first, we're going into that pandemic, you're like, whoa, okay, this was so jarring because you're like, the unthinkable is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that I was like, okay, well, if this is happening for me or for us, then my brain shifts into, well, let's look at all the good that can come out of this. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a lot of bad that happened and there was a lot of, people lost their lives in a crazy situation. But for me, it was like, okay, let's look at how I can use this to my advantage or how I can, get the good out of it. I remember I was live online every day for that first month because I was like, I really want to, and it wasn't just to support our community. And I'm like, all right, guys, everything that you've learned from me, this is the time that we've applied. This is the reason you've applied because this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
And it was also for me as well, for my own sanity, because I'm like, I feel like I need to be doing something positive.
Right.
So,
well, I don't think it was not even just positive. It was actually something that was more true. It was more truth and love-based than fear-based.
Yes, exactly. So when you're going into this uncertain time and you're going, well, if this is happening, for my highest good, and like, our brains will default to, as they'll default to the negative, and we can spiral into a whole lot of what ifs and what if this happens and, and those kind of things. But when we can shift just a little bit and go, okay, no, I can see this is going to be great for this. This is what I'm going to, take out of this. What you're also doing is resonating at a higher frequency. So you are attracting things that are going to be for your highest good anyway, that's going to help you through that uncertain time.
Yes. And I think that I feel that when things are tough, it's acknowledging we are, like, as human beings, we are incredible manifestors and creators and energetic beings. And we're also emotional and mental beings. So I found it challenging for me, if I'm going through something hard, to shift immediately to, this is happening for me. I can think the thought, but to shift my whole emotional body requires actually going, this is happening for me. And it really sucks. And I have some big feelings about it. Then I am going to cry my tears about it. I'm going to talk to my coach about it. I'm going to give myself some space to go through my grief, to get my anger out, to whatever, without going into victim. I think that's the key, is just being like, of course I'm feeling this way. One of the things that I have a coach that I hired in my transition into motherhood, because I started noticing I was getting a little depression and anxiety come up. And I was like, whoa, this is the time to reach out because this could keep going in a direction I don't want it to go. So let me get some support, and found someone who's really aligned. And one of the things that she always says to me when I leave her a Voxer about something I'm feeling, she's like, of course you're feeling that way. That makes perfect sense. And that's so comforting. And it's so different than, oh, Natalie, I'm so sorry. That's really hard. I can't believe that happened to you. Pity and sympathy, bleh. To the part of us that loves to play in the victim, it feels wonderful. But I don't like being in that victim place. And when someone sends me pity now, I'm like, oh my God, please stop. But when my feelings are just validated, which was what we needed so much as children too, and just says, of course. Yeah, of course you're feeling a little scared. Of course, this is really sad. That makes so much sense you're feeling that way. And if we can say that to ourselves, just that acknowledgement has been really helpful for me, Natalie, because I think I can spiral into worst case scenarios and thinking. What's been so helpful for me is to know that I'm more likely to do that if I bypass the feeling level. It's sort of like the downward spiral is my ding alarm system of you've got some feelings here that are normal and natural for what you're going through. How about we give those some airtime and let those move through your body? And then it's easier to shift on the mental level.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you are exactly right. And it's not instantly went into that thought. I mean, at first I was like, what?
Yeah, right. You had your normal reaction. Yeah.
and then you go through it. Everyone else, well, I don't know everyone else, but I definitely put on about 15 pounds during that time. And it was, definitely struggling on some level. And we're not talking about a spiritual bypass here either. We're not talking about that. I'm going to go straight to the happy, shiny.
Right. No, I know that's not you. That's not who you are. No, that's not who you are at all. And that's why I've always loved you and loved your work, is that you make room for the human and also teach the energetic and the human potential, right? Like we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so making room for that humanity part, right? There's just so much of this podcast and what you do and our conversation. Like, yeah, like you're human and these things are going to happen. And you've always been really honest about like challenges you've had. And, right? And here's what we can shift into. Because I think that one of the, sort of collective, back to what I was saying earlier that gets me revved up, is one of the collective beliefs we're shifting is that like midlife is when just things start going downhill, especially for women. And we can go, of course, like this is an interesting time in your life. Hormones are changing, and not just a little bit, a lot. That's a whole identity shift we can talk about. Your relationship might be changing, your family might be changing, your body is changing, your family dynamics are changing, your career is changing. So like, of course, but let's not make that mean you need to crawl into a hole and disappear and not think that you have anything to contribute in the world. And I think I see a lot of women, and this is why I love coaching women, especially in this demo, is because I'm like, no. Like the way your hormones are shifting, the way your life is shifting right now, you are going into your wisdom world years. And we need you. Like we need women in their midlife to be influential and powerful and in their power and in their creative expression, because there's so much energetic resources that come online as we age. We got to step out of this conditioning that like we just are fading away and withering into nothing. And, if we're feeling any of that, like getting some support, maybe we need hormonal support, maybe we need coaching. Like if you're not feeling excited and enlivened and like wanting to share your wisdom, and I don't mean you have to become a coach or have a huge platform, but just like being in that archetype, then maybe some support is necessary to help you really like embrace. And so maybe you need some support, some coaching, some like support on the physical level to help you like really come into this, I think, reclamation, because so much in our 20s, 30s, and 40s is figuring out how the heck to like be a human and then taking care of others and building, right? And at midlife, we really get to go, okay, what have I built? What do I need to burn down? What do I need to reconstruct? And what else do I want to create? Those are really powerful questions to be asking ourselves.
I love that. And I agree. And that's another big subject that we focus here on the podcast is, and Dr. Anna Chebeka is coming back. And, her whole thing is, look, menopause is mandatory, but suffering through it isn't.
Love that. Ooh, that gives me chills. Yeah.
Because, come on, as women, we go through puberty and we got all the things that you have as women as you're growing up and then babies and things. And then you think you get to this time of life and go, oh, thank God all that's over. You go, oh no, what fresh hell is this? Oh, our brains completely rewire at this time of our life. So, but there is so much support that we can have out there. And it's not just support, physically and, with different supplements and hormones and different things we can do. But what I also love about this time of our life is the female friendships and the things that we can do.
Yes.
We're not competing anymore. Like we were like, no, we're done with that,
Done with that. Everybody's invited. There's no cool girl. There's no head cheerleader. I love that too. And I have found female friendships so necessary and so supportive because only other women around this stage of life understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they do. Well, darling, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. And like I said, there's a lot of women I know that are listening who can relate to a whole ton of this. But if there was one thing that you could share, like an action step or something that women could do right now that you think will really shift the needle on any kind of doubt, self-worrying that they have at this time in their life, because, it can be scary when you've lived life a certain way for a long period of time to step into something new, something that's going to stretch you, something that's, a little bit of the unknown, something that you think that would help them to navigate through a moment like that.
Well, I'm going to give kind of a longer, deeper answer and then a shorter one. So the longer, deeper is the other thing that I see happening in midlife is a lot of distractions have been removed. Our brains start to get rewired. So stuff that we've been able to brush under the rug for decades, our whole life, starts to go, hello, remember this. And especially women who've had children that are getting older and they're not in that like day-to-day caring for a child, their inner child stuff comes up. And that can be really confronting and daunting. And we can start to look for ways to numb, like having more wine or having more food, or let me go help somebody or get back in enabling patterns or whatever it may be. And so what I'd say is like at this time in midlife, this is really when it's so crucial and actually quite potent to look at, all right, what have I been carrying around that I haven't really unpacked, that I haven't really healed? And this doesn't mean you have to spend years in therapy and years crying. I think healing work can be a lot more effective and efficient than, nothing against therapy, but I think people get intimidated because they're like, oh my gosh, I have to sit and go through all my traumas and talk about my past for years and years, 1 hour a week. Doesn't have to look like that. You know, there's so many healing modalities and so many skilled therapists and practitioners out in the world, and we are our own best healer as well. So, you know, my specialty and what I love helping people with is inner child work. And especially those who have mothered in some way, we've often neglected our own inner child. So really looking at, you know, what did I never get as a child? What have I really needed in my life that I haven't really gotten? You know, what kind of coping strategies, whether it's people pleasing or control or perfectionism or, you know, hypervigilance, which is really a trauma response, or achieving, what kind of survival patterns have I been in? Because your survival patterns have gotten you to where you are, but they're not going to take you to your fullest potential. They basically just keep you in surviving, not really thriving. And so this is a beautiful time to do that deeper work, to really do that, reach out to a coach, to do a program, to whatever resonates with you, to be like, you know what? It's time to lift up that rug, because I've been standing on that rug and it's taken me to where I am. And as long as I keep standing on that rug, I'm going to get more of whatever those belief systems are. Like that's what's going to happen in my life. And I think that's why so many women in their midlife get stuck, because they're not lifting up the rug. So that would be my like overall answer. And then my shorter tip would be, whenever you're faced with any kind of like question or decision or challenge, whatever it is, to put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly, come back into your body and just be like, okay, what am I feeling about this? What am I making this mean? So what am I feeling? Like, what's my body feeling? Okay, what am I making all that mean? What am I believing about that? And what's one belief that's not a huge shift? You know, we don't want to go from, you know, I'm believing I'm worthless to I'm the most confident person in the world, because our subconscious mind isn't going to believe that. But even if it's shifting from, you know, I believe I have no worth and value in the world, to I believe I do have wisdom. Like, that's a great shift. And then asking, like, how would I actually feel if I believe that? Because what we're doing by just hand on heart, hand on belly, and going through those steps is we're interrupting the subconscious spiral that so many of us go on. So pattern is, to sum it up, pattern interruption. Like noticing when we have a reaction that's programmed and going, stop, I'm going to shift my programming a little bit. I'm going to actually take dominion over my own inner experience, pay attention to it, validate my feelings, and see if I can create one small shift in how I feel with what I'm choosing to believe.
You know, what I hear is that we get to shift from doing to being, or at this time of our life. You know, who do we want to be? You know, getting back to that question, that the answer to the question that I was asking in the beginning of the podcast was like, because we get to be who we want for a lot of the big responsibilities of looked after and whatever. And we get to, you know, this is such an amazing time of our life. And a lot of women I know, we go 50s, we're just getting started. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. And with all the technology and health, you know, benefits and the peptides and everything that we got, I mean, we're halfway.
Yeah, I know. I saw a statistic too that if you have a baby over 40, you're like 80% more likely to live to over 100. I'm like, all right, well, I've got more than half that I'm facing. And I think a lot of women just, you know, sometimes I hear objections to things. A lot of women might say, well, Natalie and Christine, you don't understand. I have so much I have to do. Like, I'm not at the phase in my life where everything's taken care of and I have so much to do. And what I say is, yeah, of course you feel that way. You have a lot of responsibilities and a lot on your plate. And what's under that rug that is telling you that if you drop any of those balls, you make any shifts, fill in the blank, bad thing is going to happen, and really challenge that.
Well, what a beautiful note to finish the podcast on.
Thank you
so much for your time and for being here today. It's such a pleasure seeing you and sharing this conversation with our community.
My pleasure. Love seeing you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Not Over, Just Different. If you felt inspired by this episode, please subscribe and drop a comment below to let us know what you loved. My goal is to reignite the spark that you may think you've lost and cultivate a space where no matter what walk of life you are, you can step into the world with power and confidence. I would love to hear your reviews. It helps us to reach more incredible women like you. So until next time, keep growing, keep striving, and keep believing in the power of your potential. Here's to living your best life now.